What's up, guys? Welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Gear with coaches Skip Hill, Andrew Berry, and myself, Scott McNally. All of our programming is brought to you by TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK over there for some additional savings at True Nutrition. Of course, go to supplementsource.ca for our Canadians because they have great deals that change week to week. Of course, too, we are brought to you by you guys, the people of Patreon. We wanted to start with the topic of BPC157. It's a question that we get asked regularly. And since it's never been like the title lead topic, they say, oh, well, what episode was that on? You've talked about it. I say we've talked about it 100 times. And they're like, where can I find it? I don't know. So instead of just leaving you in the dark there, we are going to make it our main topic. That way it'll be in the title, and anybody who wants to learn about BPC and at least hear our opinions and experiences, you can watch this show. So I know that Andrew and I both have had positive experience with it. I think that we're both on more or less the same page. I had a few questions I wanted to pose and get both of your opinions. On the other hand, I know Skip has felt like, man, it hasn't done anything for me. So for that reason, I do want to hear what you have to say, Skip. But let's go to Andrew first. Andrew, you've been using it for some time, just like myself, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe we should talk about what it is, what it does, its actions, what to expect out of it right from the gate.
Absolutely.
BPC157, body protection compound 157. It's a naturally occurring substance produced in human gastric juice, right? So we're not to say that the bottles that you're getting off various websites do not come from someone's human stomach. It's a 15 amino acid sequence peptide, but that we can synthetically recreate. But it does occur naturally, and it has protective effects for your GI. Additionally, it has regenerative properties. It helps with producing new capillary tissues. It helps with collagen production. It helps with promoting new blood vessels, like I mentioned, via the vascular endothelial growth factor. VEGF is what it stands for. It has anti-inflammatory properties. It has an analgesic in terms of pain relief. Helps with joints. I mentioned the GI. As well as a tissue repair. So it's not necessarily like an ergogenic product. In terms of, it's not going to make you lift more weight. It's not going to make you burn fat necessarily, though there is some research going into that. It's going to help you heal. So if you're someone that's had, you've torn a muscle, or you've torn a ligament, or you've, you're coming back from a pec tear or something like that, this is a peptide that you're going to want to take. In terms of dosing, I like to hit it hard. So if you have an acute injury, such as, when you're on you're doing the ham curl, we've all probably had this where you get to a certain rep and all of a sudden it feels like a rubber band just snaps back there, right? You partially torn a piece of that muscle. You probably haven't completely torn it. Otherwise you wouldn't be able to lift your ankle towards your buttocks, but a small tear just the same. And you'll notice that maybe, 5-6 days later, you got a lot of blood pooling down towards your knee. This would be a prime example of when to use BPC157. I like to hit it hard with 1 milligram a day for usually, 10, 15, maybe even 20 days. And then from there, I cut it back to like 50 or 250 micrograms a day. Additionally, I do like to use it every day as a preventative for preventative maintenance. And I can say with experience that I have less of those little tweaks, less aches and pains in like the knees, the shoulders, elbows, tendonitis, stuff like that, when I do take it religiously every single day. And it, as far as peptides go, it's fairly cost effective. It's not something like the IGF-1s or semaglutide or something like that that's, costing you hundreds of dollars a month. You can use it for preventative maintenance at somewhere around, $35 to $45 a month. So I do think it's a supplement that has a lot of, use, particularly in our sport. But if you're someone that's also, to change the topic a little bit, if you're someone that's suffering from GI issues, I do think this is a supplement that you should try as well.
I call that right on topic. I call that right on topic, man. Yeah.
Because every bodybuilder, every bodybuilder runs into GI issues at some point from overeating, from eating the same foods too often, from force feeding, etc. I do think, it has many different uses, injury related, GI related. I'm sold on it. I've been using it for at least 10 or 11 years now. When it first came out, I started using it, and because I would get these little tiny pec tears. Yeah. And, you know, like they're grade 3 strains or something, or grade 2 strains or something like that. Not a full tear or nothing, but you feel them just the same, and they start to bruise and whatnot. So, you know, you tore something. I started using it there probably maybe around 2015 or 16. And I've been using it. I switched over to using it daily somewhere around 2020. And I've noticed I have less little tweaks, less inflammation, less joint issues. So I highly recommend it.
That's great, man. I haven't used it just as a preventative. But I've used it under multiple circumstances of, you know, tweaks, strains, and injuries. I found it to be most beneficial for, I would say, the more surface the injury is, or the more minor the injury is, the more benefit I've gotten out of it. You know what I mean? If I've had like a deep back strain, I feel like I don't get the instant relief, but I think there's probably a lot more inflammation to contend with. So from what I understand, it, like I think you mentioned, it is beneficial for as an anti-inflammatory for inflammation. And that was something I don't think we talked about early on, but I kind of put 2 and 2 together, because I noticed that, you know, I deal with, say, like bicep tendonitis, and my shoulder would just be throbbing, and I'd start BPC and notice benefit within like 1 day, you know, and I had to say to myself, well, it can't be healing in this period of time. You know what I mean? So
right.
I do think that depending on the kind of issue you're dealing with, it may be more or less beneficial. That's what I've found. You know, like I could get instant relief from like a minor shoulder tendonitis or a minor elbow tendonitis, but like I throw my back out, and to the point where like you can't move, you can't bend over, I'm not expecting the same relief. You know what I mean?
That's a good point. Yeah. Can I also add one more thing I forgot to mention, that I think you will get a synergistic additive effect if you are using collagen when you are using BPC157. I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget to use, or they don't know to add it in. And I know, Scott, you're big on collagen. It helped you heal your shoulders up big time.
Yeah.
Myself as well, you know, 20 grams a day. I use our Granite Supplements product, code Barry10 if you want to try. And it does help when you combine it with BPC. And the third magic ingredient is GH. So, you know, BPC will work on its own. It'll work better with collagen. It'll work better with collagen and GH for sure.
What would you call a minimal effective dose for GH for this, you know, for this situation?
10,
probably
12 IU. Oh, you were asking.
two units 5 days a week. So like maybe 10 units a week.
I'd be good with that. I'd be good with that. And so I guess I'm a little bit different dosing wise. I'm with you that like 1 milligram is where I start for sure. And I usually would do that for like the first, usually it's a 5 milligram vial, and I'll do that for the first 5 days. And then after that, I'd take it down to like 750 for the next vial. And then I, you know, given an injury situation, and then down to 500 for an extended period of time for, you know, whatever it took to, for whatever it took to heal it. Administration, you know, we used to hear that you wanted to inject it directly into the injured area, that you're going to get that, you wanted to like take it locally. Then later we started hearing, well, you're going to get a systemic effect. I know you and I are both on the same page that there's kind of like a little bit of bro in me. Now, there's a lot of bro, you know, but I want to make sure that if there is potentially any kind of, you know, any kind of localized benefit, I want to take it there. So especially if it's easy, if it's like an ankle, I'm probably not going to mess with trying to get something in my ankle. But if it's like my shoulder, it's easy to get it in the shoulder. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I remember having this conversation with Skip through text like 2 or 3 years ago, because I remember being in Vermont, sitting at my desk up there. And I'm like, well, you know, the bro science thing is, you know, put it as local as you can to the site of injury. But then the smart guy in me says, well, as soon as anything hits the bloodstream, it becomes systemic within minutes anyway. But then I caveated it with, but the superstitious bodybuilder in me is going to try to put it as close to the site as possible. So,
and those are my thoughts on it too. It's like, just in case I'm wrong for some, and we come across that first compound that works locally, well, then I'll just be taking it locally, because if you err on that side, the drug goes systemic anyway. So why would you not, just from a sensical approach, you know, just put it there, just go, well, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it'll help.
And I'm 100% with you on the collagen, by the way. The way I always have explained it is kind of like with bodybuilding. If we're going to take anabolics, and we need like the actual building materials to make use of those anabolics. If we're going to take BPC, then let's take some collagen and get the raw materials that we need. What about the different varieties that we have? You mentioned like stomach issues. I know they have oral. Of course, there's the standard lipolyzed peptide, and then also, like the amino site that we know about has the nasal spray version.
I'm not so keen on anything other than injectables. In my mind, the best delivery system to get things into your bloodstream is injectable always. That's the basis of how we take our anabolics, right? Is injectables. We obviously have some orals, but anytime you're subjecting something to, the first pass in the liver, there's the possibility that you're breaking it down into its individual components, and it's a 15 amino acid sequence compound. So, you know what I mean? I'm taking it. I'm not taking it nasally. I'm not taking it orally. I'm taking it injectable. Though my buddy Phil Viz, I think, was trying to tell me that there's a way you can take it orally in this encapsulation product that will get to like your lower GI. And I got to follow up on that with them. But I think you're going to get the same effect if you're taking it and injecting.
Yeah.
And let me just add this part, Scott, if I can.
Yeah.
I only have an opinion on BPC based on the fact that it didn't work well for me from an injury standpoint. I haven't even, honestly, there may be a huge benefit from a GI standpoint. I just haven't used it in that regard. And, my judgment or, my verdict on BPC is just strictly from the fact that I used it under two circumstances with pretty bad injuries. And didn't notice really much of anything. The truth is similar to your situation, Scott, where you said it may help with more minor injuries. That may be true. That may be very true, and it may. At least
I noticed it. It might be that I notice it more with something that's easier to like bring that inflammation down as well.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a 10 injury on a scale of 1 to 10, and it brought it down to a 9.25 or a 9, I wouldn't have noticed that. I wouldn't have known. So I haven't, and I don't. When I have minor injuries and stuff, I don't. And this isn't bad. This is just me giving my opinion, I guess, but I don't go for, maybe I just don't train hard enough. You guys have tweaks like that in your hamstrings and stuff. I don't get that. If I have any tweaks, I have a QL that might flare up or my psoas. And that's a 54-year-old thing. It's like, what injuries have you had to deal with in the last couple of years, Skip? It's just usually an irritated QL or psoas. That's about it that tightens up. Stretch it out. It's good to go. Be careful not to train legs too hard with too much intrathecal pressure. I'm good to go.
You're just not using a big enough needle to get all the way in there, Skip.
Yeah, exactly.
Got to go deeper.
I need one of those veterinarian needles that's like 6 inches, 5 inches long. I don't know.
About 15 years ago, when I was trying to get into medical school, I was volunteering at, I was working with a liver doctor, right? So we saw people with like hepatitis, HIV, like all sorts of bad stuff, right?
Yeah.
And one day we were in clinic, and my doctor friend let me use a needle that was like, I don't know if I can show you shit. It was like that long, right? It was like a
9 inches long.
Yeah, like what you're used to. But so drive it into this guy's stomach, and we pulled out like 500 cc's of fluid because he had ascites, like where
ascites. Yeah, that's where I was going. That's
man. Like
those big needles are pretty important for that one.
Yeah, he needed some relief, and we pulled I think 4 or 5 of those out. So
Dang.
And I'm sure it didn't take long for that to fill back up again.
Right.
It's like a Band-Aid therapy, because I mean, you got ascites, you're not in good shape, and that water retention comes back real quick.
Mm-hmm.
One of the common questions we get asked by you guys is, what would you do differently with your bodybuilding if you could go back in time? given all the experience and education I have today, there's a number of things that I would have done differently. One of them is that I would have started using collagen sooner. Collagen is one of the few supplements that will actually rebuild connective tissue. It took me tearing my super Spinatus in 2021 to get with the program. I use True Nutrition's hydrolyzed beef collagen. I get the unflavored version. I pay for it myself, just like you guys do. I use 20 grams a day, mix it into my coffee. It's totally unflavored. You don't even taste it. Plus, I use 10 grams of their micronized creatine. Creatine has been shown to improve brain health, especially for the aging brain. I need that. And of course, you know, we've always known about the muscle building effects. So this is my morning routine every day, and I'm encouraging you guys to do the same. Use our code THINK for savings. Plus, it's the only way for them to know that this advertising is being heard. Otherwise, they just think you're some random dude that clicked on an ad.
Ain't nothing to it but to do it.
Okay, so do you guys want to go to Justin Wyatt's question, or do you want to go to the main event's question? Because we've got a bunch of good stuff here, and I'm seeing some stuff pop up in the live stream. Tino's with us. He has a question about type 1 diabetes, but we can get to that today, Tino. We won't forget about you. What do you think? All right, let's go with the main event. Main event.
I'm getting emotional over the questions here.
Which we wanted to give him some special attention today. Main event, right, Andrew?
Yeah, he looked amazing last was it Saturday. He won his pro card. He is from Maine. I don't know him personally. I think I've seen him on stage a few times, but I think runs in some of the same circles of people that I know. Like my buddy Nate said, he was really good. So yeah, no, he looked excellent on stage, and he sealed the deal, got his pro card.
Hell yeah, yeah, he looked incredible, man.
Yeah, I mean that structure's okay. God, I hate I hate my parents even more. No, I don't. Yeah. I love them. I just hate the fact that when I was shopping for genetics, they were like the ghetto cereal that is on the bottom shelf. It's not like, it's kind of like not Fruit Loops, but like some other stupid name that's generic and in a bag or something. I don't know. I needed to shop better for my genetics. Do you guys do this? I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm older. Maybe it's because I have mediocre genetics. But I don't sit here and like long over it and like, you know, throw a pity party for myself. But how nice it would be to just trape. And I'm not taking anything away from this guy from a work ethic or anything. That's not at all. I want to be very clear on it.
You don't sound like it.
Putting the time in that I put into this.
You deserve more, Skip. We all agree. You deserve more.
No. I don't. And I don't. I honestly don't. But how nice it would be to just, with the passion and being so focused on this hobby for 40 years, how nice it would be to just have a slightly genetic superiority to my structure. I don't know. Shit. I'm sure I'm not the only one listening who has thought of that either.
Well, no, it's because I get what you're saying, Skip. I think it goes a couple different ways, you know, because when you see a really great bodybuilder, it's someone that obviously has that great structure, but then also has that same mindset that you're describing. But then I think it goes the other way too, because we've seen so many good guys on the national level that make it to like 3rd place, 4th place, and then they just stop going when they would easily have won a pro card, or not easily, but they would have won a pro card had they continued. But I think when things, well, here's a prime example, Justin Harris. Because I think he even said in an interview that when he was younger and being very competitive, I think he got 3rd at USA's in 2000 something. It just started coming too easy for him, and he got bored. And then he went back to school, right?
Yeah.
So I think some people waste their genetics, but not knowing they're wasting it because they just get bored with it. You know, like if you were so good at playing piano, but you don't really love the piano, you're not going to play the piano. You're wasting that talent, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
Whereas your mom's like, oh my God, you were the best piano player ever. You could be playing at such and such hall, and you know, you could be on whatever. So yeah, I mean, it just comes down to both your genetics, your drive, and your interests, you know?
Yeah. I've always said that I think the guy in 2nd place, or if you have a friend who is genetically superior, more muscular, and I did when I was in high school, I was constantly chasing him. He got all the, you know, the attention, and he's so muscular, he's such a big dude, and that drove me, because I thought, man, he's not that great, you know, that type of thing. And so it was kind of just out of my reach, and I think it may have kept me motivated. Let me ask you this, and this is not a shot at Justin Compton. This is just me calling spade a spade. I wonder if Justin Compton got bored of it too. I don't know if you guys know him, but he's a pretty cool dude. He's pretty humble. He fishes.
No.
Don't know him.
He
He
fishes.
got hurt. No, he got hurt.
Oh, it's okay. I don't know him well enough to know the
Yeah,
details.
no.
I thought maybe he just got bored with it and went, and now he's making a comeback, and he's coming back. At least last I knew he was coming back.
No, he looks nasty like year round now. Not as big as he was when he was competing, but I'm not gonna throw out what I know exactly, but it wasn't the lifestyle.
Gotcha.
I'll say this: he was freaking nutty, and when he was competing, man, like he had like everybody talking. There was no question.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, quick shout out too, because we have Nick Vuocolo with us. I brought his Instagram up.
Client
of mine.
Well.
Thank you. And I mean, he worked his butt off for this. So he ended up getting third in 40 plus masters, which was like our main target. And he's going to compete again in 2 weeks, and we're going to bring a little more fullness. I think it's not much, but like he can, if a pound to a pound and a half really makes a difference on him, and I know that we can get that and not sacrifice any of this. So that's going to be the goal for that. And thanks for hanging with us today, man. All right. So
you didn't ask the main events question.
Yeah, I was going to say, so the question, yes, the question is, what was your best off season, each of you individually, that you've ever had? And do you think, what do you think was the biggest factor?
I bet Andrew and I are close to the same year for our off season. I bet we're going to be like a year or two off.
Really?
Yep.
You then lead the way.
I want to make sure I get it right. 2004 into 5. Am I close?
Yes, if I'm cheating.
Well, the other thing is too, I mean, obviously I could go back to like when I first started, you make your big mistake, but I think the most progress I made knowing what I was doing with full focus and a plan going in, and then tweaking that plan really, really well, efficiently and optimally. And I know the exact reason of why it was so good. And it wasn't gear. Everybody's going, oh, it's gear. You're taking a ton of gear. Actually, I wasn't taking a lot of gear. I was taking significantly less gear in the 2000s versus what I have taken since I've been older. That'll get some shitty comments, I'm sure. Now that I think about it in the YouTubes, in the comment section. But 2004 to 2005. So I'm off a couple years from.
Well, I mean, if I'm being completely honest, like we had this question on Nate's, ask me answer Instagram thing when we were shooting a YouTube video earlier from the gym, which should be out later on, I think this week. But I kind of gave a smart ass answer. Like, well, my best off season was when I got off stage in 2005, and then I didn't compete again until 2014, and I gained like 40 pounds of stage weight, but that's kind of a cheat answer because it's like, it was a perma off season, but it was over 8-9 years, but no, my best was, it's a little embarrassing to say this because a lot of people were really hurting in 2020 when the world shut down, right?
Yeah.
But it was one of my best years ever in terms of living, travel. Like we traveled everywhere. We lived like it was like, because flights were so cheap.
Oh,
we
yeah.
went to every show. Rachel competed in 8 shows. I competed in 2 or 3 shows. But anyway, we stayed down here in Florida for almost a month at one stretch, and then I think we did Tahoe. We did a bunch of fun stuff, right? But so I was dieting all year 2020. That's what we both did. And then my off season from 2020 to 2021 competition season was probably my best in terms of lean growth, and at least in a long time or recent memory. Because, and again, it wasn't the gear. My gear was fairly low. It wasn't crazy. But I think it was just I had such a good contest season, and I was set up for such a good rebound that I got up to a pretty clean 284, and like a 284 that I wouldn't have been embarrassed to have to take my shirt off or something, still some ab wall lines and nothing hanging over the back, that kind of thing. And I would just say it was just having low stress from having such a great 2020. in terms of, because early 2020, I'm like, oh shit, the world's shutting down. I'm going to lose a bunch of clients because they're going to lose their jobs and they're not going to be able to afford to pay me. That didn't work out. It ended up being one of my best years ever, and I think we've talked about this before. For all of us, it was kind of the same thing. But yeah, I think it was just the continuity from getting off stage and just continuing the bodybuilding streak and treating it, I would say, as if I was still in prep every day until I was technically in prep again.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. It's funny that you mentioned 2020. I just said it's funny because my brain was thinking 2020. Mm-hmm. Man. Anyway, I had because I think, like you said, we've talked about this before. I had a couple months, 6 weeks, maybe 8 weeks at the start when there was a little bit of a lag, and I think people were just like, they weren't sure what was going on, so they're like, I'm going to keep it close. Maybe I'm going to have to buy more guns and ammo to be able to stave off the people trying to take all my stuff and my food and everything else. But it's funny because 2020 did not end up. It ended up being a good year. Outside of the injury that I had, it was a great year. Great prep too. One of my better cut phases at that point that I couldn't finish, which tends to be a pattern for me apparently. But anyway, now I go back to the 0405, and I'll tell you. Here's the thing. I'm going to throw this out because it was DC. I was DC training at the time. And everybody's going to go, oh, it's because of DC training. I'm like, yeah, it's great. Yeah, I was thinking about doing that. I'm going to go back to it. I will say this, and this isn't I think DC training is great. I think the entire process, the methodology, the ideology involved in it is great. It's still rock solid to this day. But I progressed better. I'm not convinced that I progressed better because of strictly DC training, because I had to tweak it a little bit. I overtrained so quickly that I can't typically do rest pause. I have to go to failure, and if I go beyond failure for even just within 2 or 3 weeks, I'm starting to overtrain. So I did kind of my own version of it. But what really fed the growth was the very low volume. The recovery was great, and it was an off season. I'm not necessarily eating. I didn't eat everything under the sun. I stayed in what was off season condition, pretty good off season. It wasn't, that I had lines, and I wouldn't have had any problem taking off my shirt. But when I did, you would be like, oh, okay, he's off season. He's not, in bad shape. And I was 34, 35. So I carried body fat a little differently. That condition now would have a very soft lower back that I wouldn't be terribly concerned about. Maybe a little side boob too. I'm not sure, which is something that the older demographic has to deal with more so than, when we were younger. But it was the recovery. It was the low volume and arguably, bigger numbers. But I also, at the same time, and I think this is important, dealt with more minor injuries at that time than I did at any other time too, which to us makes sense. I just want to make that point that anytime you're tiptoeing on that line and you're making your best gains, you're probably tiptoeing on the line.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean that's just kind of, little things like a lateral, an LCL on my right knee that took about 5 or 6 weeks, which is funny because when you're 34, your injuries, they're not as bad and you recover quicker. That LCL now, but think, an LCL while you're squatting, it's not common. It's lateral. I mean, what that doesn't, that's an odd, kind of an odd injury. The strained bicep, that was a couple years earlier, I guess, but it was along the same lines of the higher intensity, lower volume, doing chins at 255 and having man boobs with a straight bar. You're doing chins on a straight bar. There's no angle in there. There's going to be some inward pull there on the bicep. I'm trying to think of what else I battled. I did start to have some lower back issues, minor, around that time, but that didn't get chronic until later, closer to 2009, 2010. But that was a standout. My strength was, I look back at some of those grainy videos that you took with your camera on YouTube, and they're not going to be big numbers for, you, Andrew, or, guys who, no, but for me, they were bigger numbers. And they were not only bigger numbers, but They were very controlled and mechanically sound. And, you know, I've had comments on my squats of this is how you squat. Like, this is good shit. So the thought of me squatting now, I mean, shit, that's just not even going to happen.
I feel like I was on a good roll before I had gotten sick in 2021 for that reason, Skip, that I got my strongest ever. You know, like, I'm thinking to myself, like, I'm in my 40s. I've never been the guy who was like the strongest bencher. You know, it's just never been me. And like, I could hang with people, I could do a workout with you, but I wasn't gonna like show you up or anything. And I thought to myself, like, if I'm ever gonna get strong on this movement, and I wanted to use dumbbells because I could do them in my home gym, and I could bail and not need a spot. I thought to myself, like, well, now's the time. Like, next year is a year further away from me being able to do this, and every year after. And I did. I got my strongest, and I started gaining weight without even really being gassed up, like 600 milligrams test, you know, and really not doing too much with food other than just making sure I ate. But I was getting progressive, and it was my best progression with weight ever in my mid 40s. And a lot of you guys had seen my back progress in that time, which, you know, I struggled to grow my back before that. And a lot of it was technique, but like my best growth, what I think was either like 2012 or the year after. I can't remember, because I had been competing as a middleweight, and I moved up to light heavy from 172. 18 months later was like 193, 194 on stage. And that was like my single best period. But if I were to do it again, man, it wasn't training driven. It was all food and gear driven. I was training, believe me, I was training hard, but I wasn't training with progression. If I could like redo it and go back, I would change the training to the training I learned later in life. But hey, I wasn't ready for that training yet. You know what I mean? It's like I got a late start in being serious and consistent with bodybuilding. So it took me the time to figure that out. But yeah, that'd be
how many reps
story.
in reserve were you doing then?
Oh God. Oh God.
It's that look. If I could take a screenshot of Andrew's face right now, it's just that
dude
snarky look.
Do you guys remember? That's one of the first episodes I think we recorded with Andrew, and I used on the show. I did an ammonia cap to test it out and see what it was like. Do you remember that? So that's when I started using ammonia caps for my top set. Not every time, but
no,
like
you can't do it every time.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was a process, and I got to the point where I was doing push-pull legs, and I started training like 1 day on, 2 days off was at my peak. I'd like every 9 days I was training three times. So it was such a thing, man, that like and I was really intense about it. So like by the time I got to that top set, I was like on level 11. You know what I mean? Yep. Like, poof, like my intensity mentally too it wasn't like the Dusty, where Dusty could like turn it on and train real hard and then put it down and crack a joke. Like I couldn't do that and be that strong, you know? So, but that was a great time.
To piggyback off this, if you go back to that time, how were your stress levels related to your life outside of the gym? Like, as an example, were you in financially in a good place? Relationship wise, were you in a good place? Maybe not even if you weren't in a relationship, that's okay. But I mean, were you in a good spot mentally? Because I think that is incredibly underrated when it comes. I think in cut phases, you can kind of compartmentalize and you can do, but in growth phases, I'll bet the vast majority of my, speaking for myself, and this could be the listeners too, but I bet the vast majority of those phases where you progress the most, I bet the life outside of the gym is relatively stress-free. I bet your ducks are in a row and you're not mentally drained or emotionally stressed.
The 2020, yes. That phase, my stress was real low. The one before that, whatever it was, 2012 or 13, I'd gone through a breakup. And it started out, I've told this story, where I said, my coach, who was more of a friend at the gym, good friend of mine, and he was helping to guide me. He said, hey, whatever you do, I don't care if you can't sleep. I want you to still make sure you get your training in. If you can't eat, just keep training. Just keep training no matter what. And that's what I did. And I was kind of like addicted to training. I didn't want to take days off. my job sucked because that's when I was working for the pop company, and I was shoveling as much food as I freaking could. I would say stress levels and stability was at a low, stress levels were at a high, and I was just like,
but were you able to compartmentalize that stress? Because
I shut it all out. Yeah, that's what I did back then. Yeah.
Yep. Which is another huge. We can't really get around stress. I tell this to clients all the time. Life is, you have stress. It's more about how we handle it,
of course,
and whether we're able to compartmentalize. And, you know, that's cutting to like Dusty being able to make a joke. People are like, oh, I'm so serious in the gym. Are you good at compartmentalizing? Because I can have a conversation in between a set. I might even laugh with you.
Yeah.
And then 30 seconds later, I'm in what I call, you know, I've referred to before as the green room. It's very easy to make that shift, especially for someone who has trained for a long time. And clearly Dusty would not have, you know, he's not someone that I would think would have a hard time getting into, you know, basically flipping the switch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's an element of being able to compartmentalize too. But I think overall, I'll bet that some of those bigger games, even the listeners, to be honest with you, they probably, if they dig deep and really analyze and assess, they're probably like, yeah, stress was pretty low. Things were going pretty good for me at that time. And what does that say? I mean,
maybe listeners should leave a comment about, you know, when they made their best progress, like we did. You know, I'd like to see some of those stories in the comment section.
Yeah. And what was that progress? Like how many quality pounds did you make? You know, it's a good idea. Hey guys, so I'm seeing that like 35% of you are not subscribed to the channel, which on one hand is great. That means that YouTube is getting us in front of new people. On the other hand, that means that we might not see each other again if you don't hit the subscribe button. We have several bodybuilding podcasts each week. We've got our reaction videos. We're doing YouTube shorts. So let me encourage you right now to subscribe and hit the bell. And if you're enjoying this show, then please hit the like button and leave us a comment. If you guys see anything in our comments or in the live stream, we can just take anything.
I actually have one. If I could throw this, and this isn't even any of them that I sent you, Scott.
Sure. And one thing, just to remind you too, word of the day. Just throwing it out there because I don't want to be responsible. Okay.
Yep. I'm moving this over, and I don't want to be responsible.
For forgetting.
And I'm just knocking everything over here. I've got it here somewhere. But anyway, good point. I'll bring it up.
Good.
Here's a situation. Guy hit me up with a situation. I'm not going to use his name. It kind of makes sense in a minute because I don't know if he wanted to. He hit me up and he said that he went to donate blood and was turned away. And I'm not clear on this. I was waiting for a response. I haven't gotten the response yet. Wasn't clear on this, but he was turned away because it said he was, and I'm kind of using scare quotes here. Scare quotes, not air quotes. But anyway, that's another discussion. But it's non-reactive was what he said.
Oh.
He was non-reactive. So check this out, to Hep C and STDs. And they wouldn't allow him to donate blood.
Huh. Non-reactive.
And my question was, you know, what does that mean? I mean, I've not heard. So, and he laughed and said, he goes, I'm in a monogamous relationship. You know, what should I do? And my response, you know, right away was not only very predictable. I said, you need to have a long discussion with that whore wife of yours. And, you know, obviously I said that I was joking, but outside of,
you know what it means? It means the antigen levels are too low. So like we've all been vaccinated against Hep, right? So he's not showing, well, yeah. So basically it basically means that, there's no surface antigen found. So like, you should have certain levels that show up that you've been inoculated or that you have the disease, but there should be some level of it when they test. So maybe they're going off previous blood testing that they've done when he's donated in the past, and he's been flagged because he needs to get another inoculation of the hepatitis vaccine, or he needs to get it if he's never gotten it.
Okay, that would make sense because obviously the questions are going down the line of, and I can understand, you know, like grasping because he's like, hey, you know, like I let's put it this way. If he was sleeping around on his girlfriend or his wife, he wouldn't have reached out to me and said, hey, what's going on? Can I get something like this, or can I get Hep C or STDs from like gear or stuff like? And we all know that's not the case. He probably knows that's not the case either. Obviously, that's a bodily fluid type of issue. The only way you're going to get it from gear is if you share needles, which, by the way, does bother me about. It's one more thing that bothers me about the medical community, because if you were to Google something like that,
oh yeah,
it will say drug use, but it won't say sharing needles. And that bothers me because it's ambiguous on purpose, in my opinion, that they put that out there, because it's not the drug use that is potentially a cause for Hep C. It's the sharing of needles. So it takes me back to 1988 when I was a teenager in high school, and I was at the vocation. I took vocational classes, vocational center, whatever you want to call it.
Would you take?
But I was in the biomedical class, which there were 11 kids in the class, and like 7 of them were either graduated valedictorian or salutatorian. I had no business being in this class because I was the dumbest MFer in the class by far. But I did it because I was doing some nutrition stuff and wanted to focus on some nutrition research and everything else. But nonetheless, I pulled out the physician's desk reference, the PDR, and every single anabolic steroid that was listed, it had a note saying that PED or PEDs or this particular drug, I'm paraphrasing, does not increase or does not increase physical performance, or I'm struggling to come up with the paraphrasing, but the point is they were saying every single anabolic steroid listed in the PDR at that time said that they did not increase physical performance, and that's just so laughable. Yeah. Like it's a weak attempt at for the medical community to say something like that because of people like me who are going to go in there and look and go, oh, okay, well, I won't take that, knowing full well you're full of crap.
Then why are they banned underwater?
Yeah, just things like that bother me, and I understand that was a long time ago, but still, that's just. It's another example of the medical community being ambiguous or misleading people.
This is the same community that helped form the food guide pyramid to tell you that 8 servings of grain products is better than having a steak and eggs.
And the reason my parents believe that peanut butter is a protein source.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
It's protein. I ate protein today. How much protein are you eating, Mom? Well, I had peanut butter on some crackers.
I had a piece of cheese.
Yeah.
Well, at least that's a complete protein.
True.
I mean, I would take the protein in a piece of, but I get your point. But it's just, it's so misleading. But that stood out to me. I didn't have the answer, and I didn't know. Well, I mean, I had the answer. Your wife's a whore. I would talk to her first, and it was
good thing this channel isn't monetized.
I was smiling the whole time, laughing to myself while I was responding, because I don't even know the guy, but I assume because he reached out to me, he would understand already my sense of humor. So I don't know. Maybe that's why he hasn't responded back to me. I'm not real sure.
Let's make sure we hit this one because it was asked quite some time ago on Patreon, and I didn't get to it. But he made sure to ask it here, and it was saying that he had. Here it is, Jacob. He says, tips for overnight workers. He says, the pancreas, remember this one, Andrew? The pancreas doesn't release much insulin during nighttime. Do I need to do anything differently with food?
And I think because we talked about that. Andrew
we talked about it personally.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about it on the show. We discussed it. Yeah. We were going to do it on the show, and then it never happened.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead and summarize what I said, Skip.
Well, in a nutshell, that's odd because I swear we covered this on the show. But basically, the Cliff Notes version is you're sleeping at night. So there's no real reason for the pancreas to have to work terribly hard because blood sugar levels there's not like this demand on the pancreas at that time. So as an example, myself, I'm up all night, completely different. So the pancreas would be working harder if you were up all night and you were eating meals.
Yeah, well, let's also start with like the normal circadian rhythm for 99.9% of human beings on this earth, right?
Yeah.
Is set because there is a bit more basal insulin during the waking hours, right? But it's also, as Skip's pointing out, your pancreas releases insulin in response to food intake, carbohydrate intake in particular, right? And the majority of humans, 99.9%, are awake during the day hours. So when you look at the studies, insulin's higher during the day, insulin's lower at night. Well, no, go figure. Because other than Skip and this person, they're the only two people that are up all night getting their
and
meals
not only
Skip's pancreas is releasing at night.
I'm not just a 1%. I'm a 0.1%.
Yeah.
I just want to
like
point
that
that out.
Yeah, I didn't know the answer. I thought like that's why we talked about it before. It was on text actually. It was like, hey, you guys have an answer for this because I didn't know. Maybe there was something I wasn't aware of about the pancreas. But yeah, that's the logical thing.
It's just
so
common
sense.
logic.
Yeah,
I mean, but getting back to the circadian rhythm thing, right? Like if you look that up, there's certain times based off your cortisol release, based off other hormonal cascades that come from that, where you will have a bowel movement. There's times during the day where you have a lag in energy. There's times where you'll be most alert. There's times when you have a testosterone surge if you're natty. There's times where you have a growth hormone surge if you're not using. So yes, within the circadian rhythm, depending on how you shift that based off your sleep-wake cycle, there is a little bit more or less of the hormone in the milieu. But the most common sense answer to that is, well, you're eating at night, so you're producing more insulin at night. If you're eating during the day, you produce more insulin during the day.
Did you use milieu?
Yes,
he did.
Yeah, I like that. I didn't catch it because I'm like, did he just say milieu?
I'm very nasally. I'm still recovering from.
No. That's
I didn't hear it at first, and then after you were talking for a while, I could hear it. Andrew got sick from busting his butt working at the show the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
What about a guy who has 25 milligram VAR caps from his TRT clinic? Wife is 53 years old and is wanting to take VAR. Is there a way that he can measure only 5 milligrams from a 25 milligram cap?
I mean, what I would have someone do is put that pill down. And if you've ever done cocaine, you grind the powder up and you divide it into 5 equal lines, and just similar. And
this is unprecedented advice.
Or you could literally, like Scott's doing, break out the milligram scale, and let's say the whole pill weighs 50 milligrams because people are expecting, well, but it's a 25 milligram pill. Yeah, but there's a lot of filler and binder there to keep that pill together, right? Yeah. So you would just literally, figure out what the weight is. Let's say it's 50 divided by 5. So you need to break off somehow 10 milligrams of that. Now the issue becomes, what
it's capsules, so it's all powder, so easy enough.
Okay, so it's capsules. Okay, so yeah, even better. But let's say it's a tablet, right?
Yeah.
Now the issue becomes, what happens if the drug is not evenly dispersed within the binding agent, right? Like, what if there's a little bit more of the Anavar on the left side of the pill versus the right side of the pill? Well, don't be a pussy. Just give your wife half the pill then. I'm just kidding. But I think, like Scott, you started to pull out the scale. I think that's the best way to do it. Just open it up, measure out the total volume weight, divide by 5. You got your 5 milligrams.
This is for
I want to
reloading, by the way. This is reloading.
I want to one up you because not only am I a professional drug user, but my wife is a close second because she's been on shit for long. Remember, she had a full hysterectomy back in 2006. She was only like 33. She had a full hysterectomy. She had endometriosis so bad that it was, outside of her uterus and wanting to attach to her large intestine or her intestines. I can't tell you specifically whether it was large
pictures?
or not. Yeah, exactly. Pictures of her. Forget it. Okay, so this is what I did, and it actually worked out quite well. I would take the capsules, and I would use an old. At that time, it was, you guys remember Chem 1, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chem 1. They were like long-standing. By the way, one of the owners. No, I'm not going to do that. He's a really good friend, but I won't. I'll tell you guys off the air. Really good friend, good dude. Anyway, I take one of those Chem 1 bottles. Back then, obviously, it could be amino now, whatever. And I would put X amount of capsules. I'd break them apart and put the powder in the bottle. And then I would use just a basic oil, like olive oil or something like that. And I would shake it up. Obviously, I'd do the math so that I knew what the mg per mil was, which is relatively easy to do. I think arguably easier to do than weighing out. Because, I mean, you assume that if they're, 25 milligram capsules, they're 25 milligram capsules. But if you want to go through the weighing process, that's cool. But like you said, Andrew, you could weigh it and you don't know whether the accuracy is there for the fillers and stuff like that.
A lot of people don't have scales either, but they probably have a syringe laying around.
But they are relatively inexpensive to get a very good, it's a drug scale. I mean, that's, the reality of it. And I always laugh and make sure that that's tucked away from my other gear, just in case. Anybody were to ever push through my front door, and I wouldn't want the scale next to my gear. Whatever.
If they do, anyway. I hope we're live. I hope we're recording if they do. And just turn your turn the camera.
Exactly.
Let's have a thing like I guess an agreement between the three of us. If it were to ever happen, we just turn the camera and we just pretend we go about our business. How about that?
Right. I'm sure it would get a lot of views.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying.
Actually, here's a funny one. So kind of on that note, my buddy sent me a picture of him being swatted.
Oh, Jesus.
He's laying on the ground, and he had to put his hands out in front, but he kept his phone up so he could see the guys in the riot shields and their guns aimed at him, walking towards him. And it was like a real deal picture. It was like an issue with his girlfriend. And, she told them that he has a bunch of guns and stuff. And even though he was completely compliant and not violent, he was just concerned about where she was, if she'd ran off the road and, because it was a stormy night up in Vermont. He was a, what do you call it? A nuisance or an aggressive boyfriend or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Well, yeah. Even though he made zero threats of one way or another to anybody, he went back to his house, his apartment, and was just going to call it a night. And then they showed up and they were demanding to come into his house. And he's like, no, I don't need to open the door. And well, they did need to open the door. And so he's laying on the ground and you see a picture of them walking up towards him. It was pretty crazy. Yeah.
I've been married for 31 years, and you guys know, I think I rave about my wife. I think she's super cool, and I've been fortunate for 31 years to be happily married for the vast majority of that time. But I will tell you this: the number one thing that is so cool is that I never have had to deal with a psycho girlfriend or wife.
Yeah.
I don't have to ever worry about my wife throwing me under the bus, no matter what. And I think that it's stories like that will make me realize that, because I don't even have to think about it.
Yeah.
But I hear those stories and I think, how horrible of a situation in a life where maybe not that's the norm, but it's accepted to the point of, I'm going to take a picture of this because it's kind of cool. I would literally be
you're thinking about your phone.
Side of the head. Yeah, I would just be like, what in the actual F is going on?
I'll say this.
You kidding?
Younger people today, I think they know their rights a little bit better than people that are a little bit older. And they know that if they're recording, at least it'll be admissible if the other side messes up. And they have a case. You know what I mean? Yeah. So and it keeps everyone, the checks and balances in place.
So if it were to happen, that's why you need to keep the live stream rolling, guys.
Exactly. And then
we'd have safety.
We'd have 20 witnesses between the audience and us.
Hey, there was an Uber driver here in West Palm a couple years ago who took a video, and it helped him tremendously, even though it shouldn't have. Just the fact that he had a video. So there's that.
You never told that story.
If you're an Uber driver in West Palm Beach, do not deliver food to me or where I live, because it could go downhill very, very quickly. I can joke about it now. You guys know.
You never told that story. I don't know if you ever want to tell it.
Yeah, I probably could. I probably would have no problem telling it now.
Well, think about it. Think about it if you ever wanted to.
I would sit on it for just in case. Who knows that this chump.
He's not even around anymore. He's not around here. He actually went back to.
Skip took care of him.
He wasn't.
He's not around anymore.
Accident?
Yeah.
No, he
no, he's just not around, Andrew. He's just not around.
Yeah.
He was either DECA or or something like that, he went back to the country that he was originally from. He wasn't what's the word? He wasn't
An illegal alien.
Yeah, he wasn't legal. He wasn't a United States citizen, essentially.
Okay. Can the removal of GH?
Alien.
Well, he wasn't illegal, or he would have never gone
at
to the police in the first place.
15% body fat, will it drop water and show a difference? Will it change your look? Sorry, guys, I'm just trying to get some bodybuilding in here.
Yeah,
can the removal of GH, even at 15% body fat, drop water and show and change the way that you look? Basically, are you going to improve your look at 15%?
That's difficult.
Immediately, no. But if you're using it prolonged and you get some fat loss from it, eventually it'll change your look. But it's not like a cosmetic. You start taking a shot, a couple shots for a week, you're going to look like you have abs, or you even look like you're 14% body fat compared to 15%.
But he means like removing it. I think he means like maybe if he's 15%, he's going on vacation. I'm guessing the vacation part, and he's like, man, I'm looking a little heavy. Maybe I should drop my GH before I go.
That ain't the problem. I mean, I'm just being honest. Like, you probably should have thought of this 10 weeks ago and started cleaning it up and maybe drop down to 10%, and then you'd be a lot happier with. I'm just being honest,
Yeah.
Because, it's not going to make a difference.
Okay. 260, 43 years old, 24% body fat, and want to get leaner than before. So he's been heavy his whole life. He's just looking for general advice. So let's all try to think of like one tip, because we could sit here and do a whole podcast on this. So like, what's one tip that each of us can give him?
Drink a gallon of water.
Reach out, we'll get you shredded. Oh. No, general tips.
Good. Drink a gallon of water a day. Start with that.
That's a good
one.
Drink
a gallon of water a day. A gallon of water a day. Do 5 meals a day. Make protein the main component of each one of those meals, and if you do those things right off the bat, you're going to see some changes.
I like that. How about you, Skip?
So then I'll go, because you went with the protein in the water, I'll go with carb intake, saying this. Start low, see how fast it takes you to get hungry, and then manipulate your carbohydrate amounts based on whether you're dragging ass, need more energy, you're suffering in the gym, then bring your carbs up for a couple days. And when I say up, not loading or anything, but bring them up, drop them down, play with it a little bit. And I mean, other than the obvious of more activity as far as
I haven't said one yet. You only get one. We're
giving them actionable things. I said water and 5 meals a day. Skip said, go ahead and repeat.
Carbs. Fluctuate your carbs. Start low, get hungry, then manipulate your carbs based on your needs as far as the gym and hunger.
And I'll say, if you do both of those things, add some cardio in. I'll say 30 minutes of steady state cardio. I don't know what his activity is like, but let's say he's sedentary now. If he's already, I assume he's training, if he's listening to the shows, he's added water in and he's gotten the 5 meals a day from Andrew. He's going to start manipulating those carbs from Skip. Then I'll say, just get some activity and get some 5 days a week, steady state cardio, 120, 125 beats a minute. Make sure your heart rate gets up. You do whatever you want. Go for a bike ride, go for a brisk walk. The problem here, I think, in Michigan is that the everything is so flat that it's hard to get your heart rate up just walking outside. It's okay, you can walk outside, but you got to really hoof it. I want to get your heart rate up. So if you're doing if you're at 95, it's not going to be enough to make a difference, in my opinion.
Yeah, and be consistent. Don't get discouraged after 10 days or 15 days where you're like, oh, I'm not down 5 pounds. Just, you got to do it and be consistent with it.
I like that. That was good. That was we gave them some good stuff. All right. So there's all this stuff. You guys are welcome to jump in with anything.
I got one.
Saw. Yeah. Good. Go for it.
51 years old, hematocrit of 54. Concerned or not concerned?
Well, we got to ask the follow-up questions. What elevation do you live at?
Right.
If you live in the mountains like Skip used to do, that's par for the course.
Yeah.
Let's assume sea level.
Okay, sea level. Okay. I'm not concerned. You know,
I know.
like
that's where I'm going to go. I'm glad that I'm not going to be the only one saying this.
I mean, obviously we want to try to get every marker within range, right? But as bodybuilders, as bodybuilders that have been competitive and that continue to use PEDs, we probably spend more time in that either close to out of range or out of range than perfectly in range, right? And I think we're on top of other things. Like I said, drinking water, you know, clean meals, cardiovascular, training. I think all those things together mitigate a lot of the negative markers that we see on our labs. And I know Dante's probably rolling his eyes right now, being like, "No, like you need to get clean." But I would definitely try to get these numbers back to normal at periods of time, meaning your downtime off of the gear. However long that takes, whether it's 8 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever it might be. But in terms of like alarm bells, they're not going off in my head.
Same here. One thing that I have noticed with age, it's not just myself. I noticed it with myself first, obviously, but with other clients as well, because as I aged, the demographic that I work with has aged as well. So I have more people that I work with, the majority of people that I work with are, over 40. Mm-hmm. So my question is this, and it's just something me thinking out loud. I don't know specifically why Hematocrit tends to run higher, hemoglobin and RBCs too, but Hematocrit, as we age. I don't know if it's that our body produces more red blood cells as we age. I don't think that's necessarily the case, though it could be. I think it's actually as we age, our body does not process or deal with killing off or getting rid of the RBCs like we do when we're younger. What do you think about that, Andrew?
Yeah,
almost like disposing of the older, because obviously the RBCs essentially die off. I'm being very, very simple with my explanation of it. But.
Yeah. No, I think you're definitely onto something there. I don't like to form a major opinion till I really dive into the reading and all that stuff. Yeah. But I see the same things you do. So
seems sensical. I mean, I guess from a logic standpoint, that's kind of how I see it, and that's where I lean as far as that goes. I also will add this, and I know that this is a bold statement, and I'm going to preface it with the fact that I am not a medical professional. I am not pretending. At no point have I ever pretended to be a doctor or a medical professional on the internet, on a podcast, in an email, or in my forum when I've dealt with my clients for over the last 20 years. But I still have opinions, and I think that and thankfully Dante doesn't listen to the podcast, because he would be like, "You got to be kidding me, Skip."
He keeps up.
But I do.
he keeps up.
Well, I'll say this then. I'll say this anyway, because I do stand by this, and I feel strongly about this. I don't think that the higher hematocrit level is as much of a concern for health as we have given it over the years. And here's the reason I say that. Because as much as I respect Dante's opinion, and people like Dante, and I'll say I've had clients who are, one in particular, but a few doctors who I've run this by, and one specialized in blood pathology, specifically with iron and hemoglobin. And she literally laughed and said that as I had long conversations with her, to the point where I don't know who was benefiting from the consult more, her when she was paying me, or me for taking her money and training her and getting all the extra information and questions answered that I had over those couple of years. But she laughed and said that the hematocrit, hemoglobin, and RBC levels being higher are only correlative when it comes to, essentially heart disease or heart attacks and strokes. It's the medical community cannot say that it's causative. There are so many other things that they don't understand that feed into those numbers. And the reason that I felt so good about it was I did take to her, because we've had these conversations, you know, three of us for a long time. You've heard me talk about elevation, the issues that I had when I lived at 9,000 feet versus in Denver at 5,000 feet versus sea level in Michigan and sea level now in Florida. The thing that always stuck with me was people who live, populations who live their lives at higher elevations obviously have higher hematocrit, hemoglobin, RBC levels. You have to, because your body has to acclimate to not being able to process and use as much oxygen. It's the same reason why when people have sleep apnea that their RBC, hematocrit, and hemoglobin go up. Your body is adjusting to the fact that your body doesn't have access to as much oxygen.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, those demographics have a lower incident of stroke and heart disease and heart attacks. That's a very important piece of information. And that's what made me go to her. And I mean, I've been looking for these answers for a long time. Cool thing is I don't know if you noticed this, Scott, but I think it was this last year. Could have been the year before, because we've been at Swiss a couple times together. But a couple people touched on this. There was a doctor. I can't think. Doctor. I got to be careful with this. I'm not sure if it was a doctor or not. But it wasn't Stan. It wasn't Dr. Serrano. It was somebody else who touched on there not being and I actually took pictures of the screen when he was talking, because it was a video that was up. And he touched on the fact that the hemoglobin, hematocrit, and RBC levels being high were not what was causing the problems with heart attacks and strokes. Yeah. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because even Dante has said, why are the bodybuilders, because there's so many high-level bodybuilders at Armbrust Pro Gym, why are there not more heart attacks and strokes? No one's having, I mean, let's be fair. No, I don't like to speak in absolutes. My wife and my kids will tell you that too. So I hate to say no one, ever or never.
But it's not like it's a higher population. Yeah.
It's not like in that demographic, those guys or those competitors or those guys who are on gear are having issues that we're not at sea level. So, or at sea level versus there's nothing that says there's a difference there. Now that's only a difference of 5,000 feet, a mile high versus, if you're living at 9,000, 12,000, or if you're up in the Andes. But I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna say my opinion, not medically related, just based on the information I've come across for years, and I think I've done my due diligence, because I had those issues with my blood work that scared the crap out of me when I was living at a higher elevation. I don't think there's I don't think it's causative either, and I think the correlation is weak at best. And I stand on.
Yeah, I think there's more and more people agreeing with you now, Skip. I do. Give it 5-7 years ago, you I think would have been it would have been more of an outsider idea. But what's that, Andrew?
I was petrified in
been
2012 when
what?
Yeah, like you must donate and all of this. But and I think that there has been more of a shift now.
Donating is overrated too, but that's a different rabbit hole.
Yeah. Can we do your word of the day so we make sure we get that in?
Absolutely. I'm going to contrast the two words, basically, because it's so cool. I like to do this. I know that goes against the rules a little bit.
There's no rules. There's no rules. As long as people enjoy it and they get something out of it, that's the only rule.
I'm going to contrast Obsequious with Sycophantic. Okay? And I think sycophant or sycophantic is probably more people would know that than obsequious. There's only a subtle difference between the two. Obsequious basically just means that you're attentive to the point of maybe not excess, but a good example would be like, wait staff being overly attentive and, I'm gonna make sure that everything you need is taken care of and almost excessively. The difference between obsequious and sycophantic is a sycophant does the same thing but wants to gain something. So let's just say someone is tripping over everything you say, and they want to be your friend and everything, and because you're a trainer and you have information, and they want that information, they want to glean as much information as they can from you, let's say without paying you. I would consider that to be sycophantic, and it drives me nuts.
And you can be sycophant then. That a person. So you could be sycophant then as well. Because that's the root that came up for me when I looked that up.
Sycophantic is an adjective, so yeah. Huh. I don't know. Is there sycophantizing? Sycophantation? I'm just making up shit now.
Look at the definition here, Skip. It used your other word. Obsequiously, a person who acts obsequiously towards someone important in order to gain advantage. I like that. Huh. So now we have to try to use that in sentences this week, guys.
Yeah. Sycophantic, I think, is probably more common, or sycophant is more common. I don't hear people use the word obsequious very much, but I like it. And you know what? As long as I've always said this, you don't have to have an A-list vocabulary. Let me rephrase this. It's okay to use A-list words if you know what they mean. Just use them correctly. It's the difference between who and whom. I've said this a million times, so I'm going to throw this in here. When in doubt, just use who.
I just always use who, just to keep it. I feel like if I use whom, people think I'm trying to act smart or something.
Okay, but if you use it correctly, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is, if in doubt, just use who, because no one will ever question you or catch you. Even someone who is pedantic when it comes to grammar, they're not going to bust you for using who. But I'll be the first one. It drives me nuts when people use the word whom and they use it incorrectly, because then I know you're only using it to try to impress someone, and you're doing it incorrectly. You don't even understand and it's very simple between the two, and yet they still screw it up. Use who if you're not sure. If you're absolutely sure, use whom. And whom is being phased out for what it's worth.
Is it?
It's nowhere. Yeah, it's
whom?
Nowhere near.
To whom
it's nowhere near as popular. That's why people don't bust people for using who.
Yeah,
and at its core, what is communicate? I mean, ultimately, when we speak, does it really matter if you use the wrong word, but you understand what was meant?
Well,
it probably does. It's just communication at its core. But
if you look at early documents from, like, say, our founding fathers, like Thomas Jefferson, for instance, who was considered an intellectual in his day, even spelling, like, they would spell the same word different ways.
Really?
For no random, just randomly, like strawberry, right? And one time he might write it like strawberry, the way we, B-E-R-R-Y. And then another time he might actually spell it with a B-A-R-R-Y.
Yeah.
And like that would just pass as like common English, as long as you could hear and it made sense. That's how people wrote letters to each other. For one reason or another.
My only argument with grammar and having correct grammar and syntax is this, and I tell this to my kids all the time. I'm not a very intelligent person. I'm not well educated. I don't have, the master's. I don't have any type of college degree. I think I have 12 credit hours to my name. And I always tell my kids, we are judged, whether it's right or wrong, good or bad, we're judged on our grammar, our spelling, our punctuation, and our syntax. So if you're not very smart, just be really good with punctuation and grammar and syntax, because you will be seen as being educated and articulate. And the other side of that is this. I will never understand why people who are educated and articulate don't care about proper grammar and punctuation, because then what you're doing is you're giving the implication that you're not as educated and you're not as articulate when you probably are. We're judged on these things. I'm just saying, good or bad, we're judged on them.
I could counter that, but It'd be a discussion.
But at its core, you get my point. I mean, I tell my kids, basically I'm telling my kids, you're not very smart. You're kind of stupid. But at least if you text or write something, you'll come across as not being stupid.
Well, here's where I'm going, because if someone reads my text messages, they'd be like, this guy's a freaking idiot.
But that's just a basic communication between two people.
I hate texting on my phone. I hate.
But on Facebook, are you going to? Do you pay attention to syntax?
Nope.
See, I do.
And
here's the difference. You're educated.
You point out people's mistakes when they leave comments on your page.
I am pedantic. I to a fault. And I think, I'll be honest, I'll be transparent. It's probably an insecurity of mine. I know that I'm not a very educated, and I know people
because I think you're
say,
coming from a place
that you're not intelligent. But I'm not from an educated standpoint. So that is an insecurity of mine that I'm aware of. And I think that does play into it. But I notice those things.
Let me comment on that, because you're coming from a generation that put so much stock into credentials and authority. And I think more than anything, from 2010 on, I would say this is a good thing about social media. You realize that a lot of the people in powers in positions of authority aren't all that smart. Like people, right. I mean, whether you're a president or whether you're, the head of Homeland Security, whatever it might be, that's a position of authority. But then you hear some of these answers from some of these people and you're like, those are the ideas coming out of your brain. And you realize right off the bat, like, you asked a lot of D to get to where you are today. And I mean, because my idea of intelligence comes from ideas, not necessarily, and obviously communication's a part of that, right? Because you need to be able to communicate your ideas. But some of the smartest people I know, smartest people do not have a credential, a degree, or anything like that. They're just, and they explore things that they're interested in on their own time, but they don't have a college degree or a master's degree or anything like that. Like, they're blue collar people. They might have an HVAC business, but they're some of the most intelligent people I know. And I think a lot of us know people like that. They might not use the most proper English all the time, or they might not, but what I really hone in and focus in on is their ideas and what they're saying.
I don't know much about Rachel, but because I know what you've told me about her background and her vocabulary, so that to me is just like, that's like awesome. Mm-hmm. Things like that. People with broad vocabulary.
Watch your back there, Andrew. Watch your back.
Exactly. And you know what? If I walked by Rachel in a grocery store or at a show, I might not even recognize her because I haven't seen her, but maybe, well, I met her, once. Yeah, met her once at the Olympia, but even seeing pictures of her, maybe I've seen 2 or 3 pictures. I don't know that I would recognize her, but knowing what that little bit of what you've told me, things like that, it's probably because that is something to me that I don't know. When you don't have those things, or that's your something like that is important. I find that appealing, and not even from like whether they're hot, they're not hot. You could be a dumpy fat woman, but if you have a really good vocabulary and you're well spoken, that to me it's just very impressive. That just I don't want to say envy that, but I respect that. It's appealing to me. Maybe because I wish I had a better vocabulary than I do. I don't know. I think people who are well-spoken, like I said, can come across as more intelligent than they are. And I'm not very intelligent. I want to come across as not being stupid. That's the bottom line.
All right, guys, well, let's wrap this thing up. We appreciate everybody tuning in. Of course, check out TrueNutrition.com. Use our code THINK for additional savings over there. SupplementSource.ca for Canadians. Thank you to everybody from Patreon. I do still have some Patreon questions. I guess I didn't get to them today. We got one Patreon question. We will make sure to get to them on the next show. In fact, I've got them right here, so we shall do that. Appreciate the heck out of you guys. Go to bodyberry.com to reach out to Andrew for coaching, teamskip.com to reach out to Skip, McNallyDiets@gmail.com. And for another episode of Blood, Sweat, and Gear, we will see you soon.